Hey, so we're going to ask a quick question and just make sure everyone can hear us. So, Neil, we've got a seems dead to me. Yaku, no, don't think so. Leo, hi all, has the presentation started? So can we get a little bit of feedback in the chat there just to make sure that you can hear us, because we've got a big red live now on our side. So if you wouldn't mind just popping in the chat that you can, yes. We have arrived. Okay, so now that we can successfully see that you can use the chat, we'd love it if you interact with us through the presentation here. We're very keen to understand if there are any questions as we run through it. My name is Jamie Piers. I am VP of Sales and Alliances over here at Synatic. We are a data automation platform that makes data and integration easy and really focuses on moving data between solutions into a central location as is needed. And I would like to give our panelist today, Jason Walker, an opportunity to introduce himself and just talk a little bit about what he does, and then we'll go through some agenda and some talking points for today. Jason, over to you.
Appreciate it, Jamie. Thanks again for everybody that's attending today. I'm Jason Walker. I lead an agency, InsureTech, which is I hate to say consulting company, honestly, glorified matchmaker, it maybe is a better way to put it. I work across lines of insurance companies, distribution channel of brokerages, as well as working with insurance technology firms and bridging the gap and bringing those two aisles together in order to make our lives a little bit more simplistic and ultimately make the lives of our customers more simplistic through automation as well as that human touch factor. And so that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to having this discussion with Jamie today as it revolves around data, because honestly, that's where everything aggregates and leads to.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. What I've done is I've started sharing a little bit of a slide deck here. We're going to run through some points here. And the idea of today is really to be discursive and to hear folk out and to chat a little bit about points of concern and things that don't make sense as we run through. We do like to be as interactive as possible through these sessions. So we would like it if you popped a couple of questions into the chat. I've got the chat sitting up in front of me, and I will most certainly do my best to answer any questions or Jason as we go through. I think the key thing we're really focusing on in today's session is about how we start turning data into an asset for financial services firms and start making it a meaningful tool that can be utilized in the business and leveraged to grow the business. And we're going to talk about 5 struggles in that space and five points that we can really talk about making real here. So we want to focus on real examples, real world info, real world focuses, so that we don't talk about ethereal concepts where people go and put up a slide that says, do big data, and then you go, yeah, but how? And, do data integration, and then you get left with the same question of, but how? So we want to talk a little bit about the situation the industry finds itself in, and then run through a couple of examples as we're running through that. And I'd like to get Jason's kickoff here just about how he sees the InsureTech space at the moment, and naturally the plethora of solutions out there, and just talk a little bit about his experience of how insurance agencies and insurance carriers are adopting solutions in the insurance space at the moment, and how the space is dynamically changing over time at the moment. So Jason, if you could just give a little rundown of how you see the industry at the moment.
Yes, thanks, Jamie. You said it well as far as a kickoff, and the background points are pretty much dead on. You're seeing this explosion of technology firms that have entered the space, and you're seeing an evolution of what those technology firms are able to do and provide, typically to help back office type workflows, as well as working with the consumer customer base as well. And so what I'm seeing is this movement where we started with, how do I take specific tasks that I can't stand to do within my organization and automate it, or just make it a little bit simpler. And companies, agencies, brokerages, carriers, the gamut that are supporting customers are just trying to figure out ways to reduce some of the manual labor. And as time has gone on, we've seen technologies grow up in these rate quote bind type platforms, these marketing automation type platforms. And so what ultimately is happening is, as we become more automated as businesses in the financial services sector, we are also starting to create an issue, which is we are creating more disparity across technologies and solutions. And so what needs to happen now is all of these techs are aggregating data. They're kind of holding on to it within their universe. But when we think about working with a customer back and forth, we need that data to flow. We need the baton to pass. And we need to make sure that we're not recreating or duplicating customer information along the way. We need kind of that one moment of truth or source. So now what we're seeing is more data type solutions that are growing up and saying, all right, not only should it be used for reporting, but it can also be used to enable growth and retention for our business and a better experience for our customer. And so we saw it start with kind of that manual task and just reducing that duplication and adding it in several systems. And now we're growing more and more to how does data flow and ultimately drive growth and retention initiatives instead of just reporting for us to analyze.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. And I think one of the things that really speaks to is we were in and again, I want to relate as much as I can back to real world conversations we're having in the industry. And not saying that you didn't, I'm just adding to your point. No. So what was interesting is we were talking to an insurance provider, an insurance systems provider the other day, and it was interesting to see the disparity. So in one meeting, we met with the CEO, who is typically putting together the pitch deck and going out and selling the software and engaging with customers and telling them about the well-manicured, beautiful nature of their software to the world. And on the other end, we end up meeting with the CTO and their VP of engineering. And they were like, probably around about 25% of our systems are actually truly well integrated through APIs. So the one thing that fascinates me about the industry is business people tend to misconstrue, and this isn't to create a division between technical people and business people, but business people tend to misconstrue an API as, oh, well, then it will just magically integrate. And the analogy I often use is talking about API to API being like two different languages. So you get one speaking Cantonese and the other speaking English. And unless you have a translator in between, that data doesn't flow naturally. A trend we're noticing massively in the industry is the legacy solutions really holding back, and what I've tried to do is include critical kind of indicative points at the bottom of each of these slides. So 80% of organizations surveyed in a recent survey by Deloitte felt that integration challenges hindering their digital transformations, and it's interesting to piece that together with the world of InsureTech, because unfortunately what's happening in InsureTech is just more and more and more systems are getting thrown at people to take up and to look at and explore, and there's just a lot of noise getting to people in pitches, and it's a busy space at the moment, and businesses are left questioning, well, how do I bring these things together? And really what we want to, it is the key focus point today is how do we bring these things together and make them sing from the same song sheet? And businesses aren't able to do that at the moment. It's creating a heck of a lot of pressure in the industry. So just on disparate data sets then, so what we find a lot of in the industry is that we end up with, and the analogy I always use is a simple example. Everyone's had this experience of calling into their insurance organization and being frustrated with the lack of cohesion in the answer they get. So the simple example, I've placed a claim, I call into my call center, and I call my insurer or my carrier, and the carrier then doesn't know much about me. So how do we then start creating data sets around that customer to be able to service that customer appropriately? And the disparate data sets really undermine and they undo a lot of good work that we can do in building relationships out with customers. So when we talk about disparate data sets, we're talking about a policy management system, a claims management system, a CRM, a lead generation system, all sitting as separate systems. And that really alludes to what Jason spoke about just now in terms of not having that cohesion of data sets across systems, and just more and more systems thrown at the world at the moment. Critically, what we focus on there in terms of a Synatic viewpoint of things is ETL versus integration versus warehousing, and looking at this new data age where we can dynamically move data as is necessary for the customer versus getting a tool set for specific focal points in different areas of the business. So really being able to dynamically move data between solutions. So what I wanted to get a handle on from your side, Jason, is just that comment at the bottom there is how many of your conversations at the moment, and naturally you deal with tens of, if not hundreds of different agencies, certainly naturally not daily, but perhaps across the year, is one of the pressure points we notice is that IT is being asked, IT departments, and again, this isn't a divisive conversation around splitting up business and IT, but it looks like IT is getting a ton more pressure to go and deliver integration projects. And just wanting to hear your feedback again from a real world point of view is how many conversations are you having, and how many of your conversations revolve around data automation, data integration, as opposed to just the business aspect? So how many of those business aspects fall back into data situations?
I thought when getting into this space, I was running in my previous life a digital marketing and technology firm supporting independent agencies. And after getting out of that, started this consultancy. And I thought I would be trying to make sense of solution provider A versus B and C, all kind of categorized and competing against each other. And I would help make those decisions after some vetting, but quickly learned and realized that the bigger issues that are facing agencies today is what you just explained. How do I take my agency management system, which most of these agencies have been using for decades? How do I take the management system, and now I want to start bringing in, or I'm making decisions on a CRM, and then I have an existing telephony system, and I have to go back and forth with my integrations or my relationships with carriers. All of that requires some kind of unification of everything that I'm doing as the principal of that agency and each division of that agency. How do I make sure that when I collect information, let's say in a CRM, that ultimately has to pass through a rating mechanism that then gets pushed to each one of my carriers? And then once I get that customer, I'm managing them in a management system, but I need to educate the sources where they first came through so that I have this history of the customer so I can continue to build out my lifetime value. And so at the crux of that, it is, how do I make these things sync up? And how do I make sure that the data is passing seamlessly between legacy systems that just don't cut it for me anymore, and the new solutions that have APIs, but the legacy systems may not, but I need the two to talk? How do I solve for that? And that's really what's coming out of the agencies I work with. And they're like, Jason, before you come in and recommend one more solution, help us understand how to maximize what we currently have, because our ecosystem is multiple systems to begin with. Adding one more is just a detriment to the business if we don't know how to make all of these things sync and talk.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And I think it's one of the reasons why we resonated so quickly in terms of our relationship and working together, is that it was in many ways there was, and this is said out of sense of arrogance, but there was a sense of that aha moment of, well, everything I'm hearing in feedback at the moment, Jason was trying to pitch in more solutions to his customers because he works across a multitude of different systems, and every customer is coming back with that same bit of feedback of, well, don't give me more stuff, sort out the stuff that I have. And it was, and that, as ineloquent as that is, it kind of is the basic nuts and bolts of it, is just fix what's there. Don't throw more things into the pot, because you're going back to that previous slide. All you're doing is you're making more swivel chair integration, and you're making more humans go type over there, and increasing the inefficiencies as opposed to reducing the inefficiencies. Cool. So one of the things, and Jason and I actually did a podcast recently along with insurance carrier over in the States, is we talk a lot about it at Synatic, and you would have seen again on the previous slide, and we're trying to tie these slides together and really build out a story about how we progress with these kind of projects. Is it's akin to most journeys in life. Is this fear of getting started. So it's kind of like FOMO, so fear of missing out, but it's fear of getting started, and it's fear of taking that first step. And with most things in life, when you look at the end goal and all you do is look at the end goal, the immediate first step is actually quite a difficult one to take. Even more so is if you fail at that first step, it feels even more detrimental, because you've taken your first step, you failed, you take your step back again, you look up and you go, I can't even make the first step to get to that far off destination. And what we encourage people to do, and Jason, I'm gonna let you take the second point here, is the cognizance of what you've achieved, and you spoke about it in the podcast, and just talk a little bit about encouraging people to accept what they have achieved.
Yeah, so agencies being one of my core customer bases, they're getting inundated with all the PR, and InsureTechs will pat themselves on the back with their new investment and their billion-dollar valuations. It just continues to make the agents who have to adopt to perpetuate their business to the next generation of digital natives almost feel like they haven't accomplished enough or haven't done anything in the technology space. And so the one thing that I try to do is remind my stakeholders within an agency, look, you already have specific systems. We may call them legacy at this point, but you've adopted ways to help drive your processes and procedures, both internally and with your customers. So first and foremost, tip your hat to yourself and pay yourself credit to say, I've already actually started to try to solve this. Now there's a name and a movement around it. We call it InsureTech, and we talk ad nauseum about it. But at the end of the day, you have many insurance agencies that have already been doing pieces and components of this movement. Now it just has a bigger following. And so first and foremost, give yourselves credit for what you've done. And then the second piece will be, don't even talk about technology to start. Just state that one thing that if you could change it and potentially, automate it or not have to do it anymore, it would make your life better on a daily basis. And once you open that floodgate question, you will get answers that start to characterize what is it you're truly trying to solve. And to your point, Jamie, it no longer becomes about, well, in 10 years, I want to be the perfect hybrid between human and technology. That question allows them to say, oh, I just want to drop my pencil today and never have to use it again. And in order to do that, I need to strip out this particular intake process around a submission. And that is where you can start to drive it, the incremental ways to pivot your business and strip the complexity out, and makes it a little bit of a simpler path to solve.
100%. And thanks for shedding light on that. And it's interesting. So I want to talk again to one of the customers that you introduced us to, actually, Jason, to real world stuff. So the customer had a directive from the CEO, like, you will align your customer accounts and contacts in your policy management system with Dynamic CRM. So it was literally just, and I say just because relatively speaking, they hadn't been able to achieve it, but it was just being able to align up your accounts. So who were your customers? What was the contact details of your customers between policy management system and dynamic CRM? Now, the reason that was so pivotal in their business is because they weren't able to proactively market and speak to their customers with any sort of reliance upon the fact that they knew the underpinning data was correct. So if I emailed Jason Walker to say, hey man, do you want to use would you like, well, not hey man, obviously we'd do, hi Jason, we would like to offer you another policy, household and home, and you were already using auto. They fundamentally couldn't even do that. And it was such a small step in terms of what was needed. It took, I don't know, all of about 50, 60 hours of professional services and hundreds of dollars a month, not even thousands of dollars a month in terms of license fees. But what it did was it allowed the customer to accurately and reliably have a single source of truth for their customer and be able to contact that customer with a high level of reliability and make sure that they were accurately getting in touch with that customer and asking them if they wanted to take up more services. So what we preach a lot of is look at an iterative approach. Don't set your end goal, know what your end goal is, but then bring that back to what am I doing tomorrow to be better than yesterday? And that's a real powerful statement. So what am I doing tomorrow to be better than yesterday versus what I envisage myself being in 18 months' time, which is exactly what Jason's saying. It resonates strongly between the two, is solve the burning issue, move to the next item and solve that, and then move to the next item and solve that. And don't get beat up and caught into that cycle of self-flagellation where you beat yourself up because you haven't got to where you want to be yet. I just wanted to pause at that stage and remind everyone that's on the call, please do pop questions into the chat if you'd like to ask anything. More than happy to field questions as we go along. We will have a little bit of Q&A at the end. We're going to try and stick to about 45 minutes, and depending on how long Q&A is, and then move from there. So one of the things we find is most critical in the insurance space at the moment is this customer centricity. And fundamentally, the first step we almost always recommend to an insurance agency with whom we're interacting is to build out a single view of your customer. Why is that so pivotal? It's because if we don't understand that single view of the customer, the services they have with us, whether they're happy with our service, whether they're unhappy with our service, we can't retain and augment that customer. Now, one of the interesting things is, again, towards that point at the end is around digital transformation starting to affect revenue, is because of the times we live in and the pressure that economies are under, and this is global factor, not just local to specific countries, we find that retention augmentation is a critical part of any business. So when you look at the stats of the insurance industry, roughly around about 12.5% of your customer base will leave you due to displeasure with your service, to getting a better rate from another insurer, to unfortunately people naturally pass on. So that's pretty unpreventable. But the customers that you can retain, you want to retain them, and not only retain them, but augment them. And fundamentally, that becomes a massive challenge if you don't have that single view of the customer. Also, what it means is that your operations can become inefficient because of that. So a simple example with one of our insurance carriers that we have as a client is we built out a process that reduced time to produce a claim file, which is when there's legal proceedings around a claim, from literally about 2 weeks to 5 minutes. And what we did was we used our facilities to go and fetch emails, verbal communication, call recordings, policies, claims, anything that surrounded that customer's account, and pulled that into a single file and push that out to the legal representative who was inquiring about it. And I also, again, I relate this back to a human experience of you should know me better by now. And I've actually wrote an article on this that's in our thought leadership on our blog, is if I call into a carrier and the carrier knows me and knows what I'm calling about, they know, hello, Jamie, I can see that you've got a claim in with us. Unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer, but we'd love to get an answer and an update for you by the end of today. And by the end of the day, I've got an email in my inbox saying this is where the claim is at. It totally changes my engagement with the carrier, because then I know the carrier. Sorry, then the carrier knows me. So it's a totally disarming space for me as a customer to come in to that situation, and then I'm actually motivated to engage more with that carrier because I know I'm going to get good service. So, Jason, what I wanted to ask you on that is just in terms of the show me, you know me, the you should know me better by now kind of space. How many of your customers are you seeing really focusing on that kind of space? And more specifically, it's a trend we're noticing more and more, is this talk of a customer journey through the insurance life cycle. And how are you seeing tools fit into that and exposing data on that front?
Yeah, so I'm an advisor right now to a few insurance technology firms that are leveraging data, whether it's first party or third party, in order to be able to help start to predict and prescribe actions that are whether that's human or automated, so that we have a better understanding of where to prioritize our time with customers that prioritize us. And so being able to understand propensity to close, propensity to renew, propensity to, I don't know, keep adding on to that. The point is that by leveraging data from the InsureTech's perspective, they can create a much more sticky relationship with, in this case, an agent's clients, whether or not the agent is always in front of that client, because the technology is doing it for them. And on the flip side of that, I would say nearly 100%, Jamie, of my agency customers are continuing to have the discussion about how do I make more of an impact on my customers when I'm there and when I'm not there. And, you know, I talked to one good friend of mine who runs an agency, and he said, if you can find a stewardship platform that ultimately is doing things, communicating and personalizing while I'm in bed asleep or potentially at another customer meeting, that would be the perfect holy grail. And then if you unpack that, really what he's saying in that circumstance is, I want to just create these more personalized relationships because I do a good job when I'm available, but I don't when I'm not. And there needs to be a supplement for that. And so again, it's all based on data. It's what we know about the journey of that particular person, even in their life events and their business life cycles, when we're not interacting with them as an insurance agency, but to bring that back in and build out our record of that customer and then trigger communications in ways that we interact. It's all coming together. And I feel like this space, this industry is evolving where other spaces like retail might have already done that. But we've got good guide rails to kind of lead us in that direction. Agencies want it, and InsureTechs are providing it.
Yeah, it is one of the interesting dynamics and challenges in the insurance industry is that it is a bit of a laggard when it comes to modernization and moving into new spaces. And it's an interesting dynamic because it is one of the industries that is really ripe for the picking in terms of modernization with the plethora of data sources that it has available to it now. And it's a real interesting time in the industry and a real interesting space to be in right now. Lastly, just in terms of getting buy-in, is the first and foremost thing to really focus in and hone in on is we're talking about iterative approaches and low risks. So interesting stat, again, all of these stats that I've pieced across the bottom are from a Deloitte's paper that was published. So 60% of organizations found it difficult to introduce new tools to their IT team. And the interesting space there is that you live in a compounded environment where it's almost unfair on IT teams because as an earlier stat said, 30% more is expected from IT teams in terms of delivery annually, with an increased budget of 6%. But then we're still trying to throw more InsureTechs into the space and get IT to take attention of these, or make note of these new tools coming in, and we think they're the best things since sliced bread. And then we're still expecting them to automate all the business processes that sit in these legacy systems, and we need to bring these sets of data together. So in many ways it does create this unfair, if I can use that word, environment around IT, where the IT teams in insurance industry, they do struggle to keep pace at the moment. We were on a presentation last night with a decent sized agency group. They've got about 60 agencies within their agency group. And exactly that same question. We need to get data out of Hawksoft, out of AMS 360 and Applied Epic, piece it all together, and we just can't get there. Another mid-sized customer of ours, they needed to get data out of Duck Creek, and they just couldn't get there. They'd literally been through 4 different consultants, and they managed to get the data out through the Synatic platform. The key thing here is to emphasize iterative approach and low risk. So making dynamic changes step by step, taking that stepwise journey, and really reducing the risk, both from a cost point of view. And we don't launch a 24-month project. We don't launch a 12-month project. We launch a 4-week project, and that's what we're going to go and do. And I'm saying this from a point of view of, even if you've got an incumbent data provider, so if you're with the likes of Informatica, MuleSoft, whatever it may be, the same rule applies. Like, don't think that you have to go and deliver the 12-month, 24-month project. You can turn that into iterative deliveries. And I think that's, again, it points back to one of the reasons why Jason and the Synatic team resonated quickly from the beginning, is because that is our approach and because it's recognized as a required approach. Cool. So Jason, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about, and I want to do this from an example point of view, not from a pitch point of view, and I'm not going to go too hard on the pitch. I don't know if there's any wrap-up points your side. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do in the platform and then open up to Q&A after that. Is there anything you'd like to wrap up with?
I was just going to comment on the getting buy-in, because I think that it's the most overlooked component of making technology decisions, data decisions, whatever the case may be, because you have organizations that have operated with people at various degrees in their life cycle as employees that might be approaching retirement versus those just coming in. And so to try to make sure that whatever decisions you make have proof points that objectively show that there is an outcome that everyone is going to love. Because once you can do that, you'll get the rallying around a concept. And the other thing that's very important is to make sure, and it sounds stodgy, but I've noticed this more and more, you have to have a data strategy, you have to have some data governance, and you have to have data stakeholders, those that are stewards to it. And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and hire. It just means those that maybe lead or help execute on the sales side versus the servicing versus the claims, whatever, that you have people that are nominated or put into positions where they're able to say, this is what I always need to have happen as a standardized way for data to flow, so that when we go out and make technology decisions, we don't overlook the fact that if it's not supporting our strategy and the way that we have to govern that data, then it's kind of for naught. So just having some of those, I don't want to call them rules, you don't have to be real explicit, but to have some kind of loose-based strategy and governance and stakeholders, the rest kind of just fits together, because the data ultimately is what you're going to use to prove to create buy-in. So just wanted to give that final note, because I think it's extremely important and sometimes lost.
Yeah. And again, I guess that kind of speaks to the iterative approach, is know where your end goal is in mind, know what you're planning to get to, have a strategy to get there, take the first step. And that ultimately, I guess, is the take-home message of today's exercise, is it's not as unattainable as you think it is, because you don't have to go with a 12, 24 month, 36 month project. You can set your goals, understand where you're going, and you may even miss that and dawdle off slightly to the side and then come back onto the path. And that's okay, but we'll find the way. Cool. So just a little bit about Synatic. And the reason why I want to talk a bit about this is not because I want to make this an overt pitch. It's because I want to talk about how people can actually attain things that they thought were not possible. Sorry, I've lost my screen there. There we go. So effectively, Synatic is a platform that focuses on getting the right data to the right person at the right time. So very much that's focused on saying, well, if you need to centralize the data, we'll centralize the data and put it into a Power BI report for you, or put it into a Tableau or a ClickView report. If you need to move that data through to Salesforce, a dynamic CRM, or HubSpot, we'll move that through from the policy management system into the CRM. If you need to push data out to a third party like a SEMC in the US or agency Zoom, we can go and integrate to those solutions too. We've done all sorts of weird and wacky processes where we've seen things like rate quote bind engines sitting in Excel sheets. So we've had to go and take data out of Salesforce, push it into the first sheet of an Excel document, run a macro inside the Excel document, get the data out of the last sheet, push that back through to Salesforce, and there was the rate quote bind process built in. And that's how they did it. So we fit it in with what their needs are. The trick here is that you want to look for a data partner that can move data between solutions and dynamically address data requirements as you go through your processes. So critically, what we do is we come at the situation with a platform. So we talk about our business as SWAS, software with a service. So we are ultimately a software player with a service if you need us. And what we do there is we allow you to connect up to something like Benefit Point, and we allow you to call the Benefit Point API, the account API, and push it into Synatic's data warehouse, which is called a buffer, and we push those accounts into there. What we can then do is we can go and fetch data like we fetch data out of AMS 360 and push that data into the same accounts buffer. In other words, we're aggregating out the data between Benefit Point and AMS 360 and building that single view of customer. So here you'll see that, and AMS 360 happens to work off of SQL Server. So we push data out of SQL Server into that self-same Synatic warehouse, and we then have a single view of the customer. We then dedupe the contacts with a flow over here. And then lastly, we take that self-same buffer and we push data into Salesforce. So we push an aggregated set of data out of Benefit Point and AMS 360, bring those two sets of data together, and then we push it into Salesforce. Now, if you needed to go and push that through to Ivans to pass it on to the carrier so that the carrier had an updated list of customers in their system, or if you needed to pull data out of Ivans and put it in there, if you needed to push that to a rate quote bind engine or any one of the innumerable InsureTechs out there, we can comfortably handle that. And that's really where we talk about the but how is this is actually more attainable than most folk think at the moment. And how do we start broaching this topic of, well, it's actually easier than, or it's actually more attainable. I hate using the word easy because unfortunately in reality, data is very irregularly easy. But that's it. There is a way to attain it. It's an attainable target, and it's not something that people need to be scared of anymore. We can go with this fear of getting started. We can put that aside, take our stepwise strategy and approach and start the journey. And the biggest thing is to just start the journey, just to start somewhere with something simple, solve a burning platform, get it put out, move on to the next burning issue, and then we roll out from there. So I wanted to pause quickly there for a little bit of Q&A. If there are any questions, I'd love it if you could post a couple of questions in the chat here. I haven't seen any questions come in, so I'm hoping there may be something that sparked interest as we've gone through. Other than that, we can wrap up there. I'm going to try and keep true to my quarter two timeline, and then just say thanks. So if there are any questions, maybe pop them into the chat at the moment. Any questions? Cool. Jason, any closing comments your side, and then we'll shut it down and say thanks for the time.
No, I just appreciate the time to have the discussion. And honestly, to your point, Jamie, the way that we met is because there's a real need in the space, the industry, to find someone who can make sense of it all. And that is how we met. And it is extremely relevant right now because companies are buying up technologies, just creating more disparity, not because it was intentional to do that, but certain companies either have sophisticated APIs or don't, have webhooks or don't. And you described a bunch of different use cases, from something that is smart and things that are kind of down in the weeds and working out of Excel docs. Yeah. Whatever the case, you cover it. And that's what's most important, is just use what currently exists and make sense of it so that companies can hold back, create a little bit more profitability, and ultimately drive a better culture within the organization and with their customers. So just appreciate being a part of the conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. And thank you so much for your time as well, Jason. Always great interacting with you and checking in with you. So thanks again. And thank you for everyone who attended the conversation, and look forward to hearing back from you if you've got any questions. Other than that, it's over and out. Thanks for your time. Cheers, Jason.
Thank you.